Port McNeill and District Museum is celebrating the history of women in the forest industry. The display will showcase the various sectors where women have played a role in the transportation of logs from the forest to the boom. Our first sector to be profiled is the industry's female log scalers over the past 40 or so years. Women scalers first became employed in the industry in the early 1970s, thanks to the tenacity of one woman in particular. In 1973, Janet Massey became the first female government-licensed log scaler in the province, and she paved the way for many more women to follow. Janet will tell you her own story later on. Once licensed by the provincial government, the scalers are responsible for determining the species and metric volume of each and every log. Scalers calculate the government's stumpage and royalty fees, as well as determine the quality of the log for lumber or pulp content to be utilized by the manufacturers at mills in Canada and overseas. In short, the scaler places the dollar value on the log for all of the industry stakeholders. The showcase will present pictures of our local lady scalers with their own stories of how and why they chose scaling as a career, along with other interesting experiences and perspectives.
Who was the employer at the time, did not hire women, and that got my back up. So I thought I would definitely apply, and it appealed to me because of the outdoors work and the travel. So I notified my MLA, who was Rosemary Brown at the time, and said that I was applying for the job and that they would probably turn me down. So she wrote a letter to the Ministry of Forest asking them if they were discriminating against women in their hiring practices. And at the same moment, they turned me down when I applied. And then they got the letter from Rosemary Brown, and the next day called me in for an interview. And I had to go through some testing with the male students. And I did well because I was good in math in school, and so they pretty much had to hire me.
I started on the straps, yeah, and in those days, people moved through quickly because everybody was eager to go somewhere else. There were lots of jobs.
Right.
So it wasn't so hard to get on. I think that the government also had programs at the time to help to get women in as well. But you got to move up from the straps pretty quickly.
So did you go from the straps to scaling, or how did that work?
Actually, I went to the boring machines, so I went and drilled boomsticks and put chains in for the boom guys.
Yeah.
And after that, then I went and learned how to be a grader, and then I learned how to be a scaler. Then I learned how to run front end loader, at the same time the weigh scale, and then about 25 years ago, the last job I learned how to do was to run the juicer, the grapple.
How hard was it to break into this industry? Did you have to?
At that time, it was a little harder for women in that the men weren't as accepting of us as coming in. And it was kind of like, well, if you want to work in a man's world, then come on and work like a man. So from that point of view, it was a little hard. There were only contract scalers here, and the company people were just graders. And I was the first one as a company person here to get a scaling license because a friend of mine, whose husband worked for the Forest Service at the time as a government scaler, she found out that there was a course being held in Vancouver. And so I went and nagged on the bosses here and said, I want to go. And they said, well, you can't go. But I needed a sponsor, a logging company sponsor, to sign so that I was allowed to go, because in those days the government were only accepting either people through the government. It was a new thing for company scalers. Mostly it was government people. So I nagged on the bosses until finally they said, okay, we'll sign the papers. So that's how I went. And it was after that then they decided to come up with a program here, a training program. And then people after that, they trained a lot of people here. a lot of people.
I started in January 15th, I think, that was the day, 1978. And I was out of the industry, was just about 4 years to having children. But I worked here first, and then I fell in love with one of the guys at work, and we ended up on the wrong opposite shift. So I quit and went to work for the Forest Service because they couldn't accommodate me here. And then I worked there for 3.5 years, and then I quit to have my children. And then the strike of '86 hit, and everybody was struggling. So we were behind on our payments, so I went back to work, and I wanted to come here. But when I grew up, girls usually would be a teacher or a nurse or a secretary or telephone operator. So I went away to Nanaimo, and I was working at Nanaimo Realty, just key punch operator, when my sister and friend came down and said, "Hey, Mary Lou's gone scaling." And Elaine said, "I'm going scaling." And Margie says, "I'm going scaling." And I didn't know what that was. And he says, "Well, back at Beaver Cove, we're measuring logs and grading them. And we're going to make good money." So I quit Nanaimo Realty and I came home. And sure enough, they gave me a chance at working. But so the money attracted me, and my home attracted me, because Beaver Cove was only 13 married families, married quarters, and then there was a bunkhouses. So everyone that I lived with, it felt like a family. We're so close. So the people I used to live with, now I could work with. So when I came back to work, I was with everybody I already knew. So that was attractive. I knew that I didn't have to be too afraid because everybody's looking out for me, right? So, and Mary Lou had done it, and I could do the same math as her, and I was good enough in PE as her, so I thought if she can do it, I can do it, so.
So did you take your training scalar course through the Strawline, or did you take it on your own?
No, they trained me on the job. That was really nice, and I really think more industry should do that. Yeah, one of the biggest ones was when we got pregnant, there was no financial support. But now, even the men can be off if the woman has a baby. But when we had babies, we didn't have that opportunity. Like, I don't know if you've talked to Elaine, but Elaine would go in the bathroom and pump her breast milk so that she could feed Kelly when she got home. Whereas now, men can even have time off and have social assistance if the wife had a baby. So that's changed. And health things have changed. We don't use certain kinds of paints anymore. We're more careful about chemical things we're breathing in. The wood has changed. And now we're sorting it different. Like, we'll even sort wide grain, like second growth wood, and tight grained. And it could be second growth, but it has to be tight. So,
Cut good lumber.
yeah, well, when they kiln dry it, the tight grain will stay straight, whereas the second growth might have warpage. But some people want to be environmentally sensitive to what they do in the marketplace, so they'll buy the one that has the big grain. So certain people want the wide grain, certain people want the tight grain, whereas we used to have it all together. A lot of wood is sold as right off the acre. If they planted all fir little logs in 1940, they're all the same size, they're all the same weather, they have the same diseases came through, so every log is so much the same. They don't need us to sort that anymore. It's like the whole acre is all the same wood. Mm-hmm. So, but then we have export. We don't, but we send it to people who look at it for export, and even tapering or a little bit of a bend in the log, it can't go export because it has to fit in the hull of a boat. And we're even grading some logs for the length so that they're packaged better. So the wood has changed, but the demands are changing too in the marketplace. Even going to camp, I think, is safe for girls. I've never heard of any problems ever happening to girls out there. I think I'd do it again. I think I'd do it again, yeah.
Well, originally, I actually came up to the north end of the island with a friend of mine we had just graduated high school, and we came to work in the forest industry to make some money to go to school. And I was going to go for my medical degree. And when we got here, the place kind of charmed us. The whole idea of the place kind of charmed us. And it opened up from there. Our first job was being a forestry laborer, which was grunt work beyond grunt work. I think my friend and I, we had muscles on top of muscles rapidly for two little tiny people that weighed about 100 pounds at the time. And then an opportunity arose to be actually grade logs for CAN4. And it meant we wouldn't have to do the grunt work, which was awesome.
What was the grunt work? Can you tell us a little bit?
Oh, it would be, at the time they used to have trucks go over scales, big scales that weighed, the platform scales that would weigh the trucks full of logs. And those trucks would be so muddy, and that would cause the scales to be muddy and all underneath. And we literally went underneath and took mud out in buckets, bunched over like tiny little munchkins, crawling out of the place with buckets and buckets of mud. And then we started actually strapping the loads after they were on the trucks and went into the bunks, and we were strapping them before they went into the water, which meant throwing huge straps over the loads and cinching them up. And we were like, oh, so an opportunity came to grade the logs instead of doing all that work. It was like, oh yeah, let's go for this. So we did.
And was that a training program that CAN4 offered at that time?
Yes, actually it was on-the-job training. And then because we were so new and we were so out of the city and we really didn't understand much about the forest industry at the time, it was a learning curve that was so steep, and all these opportunities started showing up. If we became industrial graders, we had an opportunity to be trained by the company at that time was CAN4 to become scalers, licensed under the government. And that opportunity did come about, and we ran for it. I did, my girlfriend, and took our licensing and all our exams for various types of scaling over the years, and we've been licensed and doing the job for over 30 years now.
Can you name some of the countries where this wood goes?
Oh, right. Well, right now, actually, we're doing a lot of work with spruce that goes to Korea, and also packages that go to Japan.
Have you noticed any changes in the industry since you started years ago?
Oh, huge changes. Huge changes in respect for us as females in this business. Huge. When we first started, we were, how should I say, not very many of us. So we were having to open a lot of doors. And in doing so, when the door opened, we weren't always appreciated for the fact that this job requires strength mentally and physically and organizational skills. And once those doors opened and the powers that be realized that women really do have a handle on that, many changes took place. It's allowed a lot more women to enter the workforce. A lot of younger people, men and women, enter the workforce as scalers. More respect for the actual responsibility of the job, which is actually huge as far as dollars and cents go for government issuing of how much it costs to take a piece of a tree off of Crown land, and what a company has to pay the government for doing that. That's what we determine. That's huge. And as a taxpayer, I want to know that that job's being done right, and I'm doing that job, and I'm doing it right.
Yeah, actually I started on weekend working under the
in the mud underneath where they weigh the loads. We used to have to take all the mud out and by hand and take it out so the scales would work properly. And digging out the dirt chute that we used to have. We used to have to take out all the branches and dirt and everything from there, and then got on strapping. So that's how I basically started.
And then you took a course through the company?
Yeah, the company put us through the scaling course, which was great. And once we got that, then I got to do grading and scaling. So that was awesome.
Have there been significant changes in the industry since you began? Can you give us some?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is our footwear. When I first started, we had to wear cork boots and pound around on the pavement, and it was horrible walking all day and pounding your knees and your body. So we fought that and won that and got to start wearing comfortable boots, and so that was great because you do so much walking. And so that was one big change. And the other one is we used to have to write everything down on a scale sheet and a board that we used to carry. So now we use handhelds, which is great because technology has changed so much over the years and makes it way quicker for everybody, and just goes directly. We can print out and then they download, goes right to the office in Nanaimo. And yeah, so that's another big change. And also we used to use 2-meter scale sticks. Now I use a 1.5 because our wood used to be way bigger, and now it's easier for us to use the 1.5 sticks, so that's kind of nice. It's lighter and easier on us.
It's a good job to get into, you know, and a lot more of the companies, whether it be ones such as this or contract companies, more of them are starting to accept women, because it has been in the contract world. It's been hard for women even today to get into because of being in camps and stuff like that. But more of them are accepting women, and I think that it's a good paying, clean outdoor job.
Is there a need for more scalers?
Well, there aren't as many scalers in the industry now as when I entered into the industry. But again, going back to how many of us will retire, there will be a few positions. I don't think it'll ever go back to what it was when I was first hired. But there should still be a need due to the fact that a group of us will walk out into retirement in the next few years.
Is the industry offering courses, or is the government still offering courses for people to take?
As far as I know, no one in industry offers courses unless they're teaching their own personnel, mostly management. I know a small one was done at the company that I work for, and it was strictly done for management. I know there was also courses out in the colleges this year, and there was actually a log exam done this year. There hadn't been one for 3 years, so they must be noticing that there's a need for more people to do that job if they're offering courses and the exam again.
I got a call and I said, "Hey, you want to work full-time here? We got somebody that quit. We could use you right now." It was like, whoa, it was exciting. Yeah.
What kind of challenges did you face?
Money was good. It wasn't a huge challenge, but you definitely had to know how to budget yourself for winter time, shutdowns. A lot of the old timers have moved on, retired, or passed away now, so I've had a chance to work with some of the old timers, really, that were in their 60s when I started. And what a wonderful learning experience it has been. And now I work with some of the people a little bit older than me. And you know, it's a great experience. And I actually really enjoy working with the men. They're much easier than women, I gotta say. Not anything against women in general, I'm one, but I guess because I'm used to it as well, more than I am a bunch of women. I do have heard horror stories of a bunch of women getting together and mood swings, you know, but men can have mood swings here too. But because we're with each other 10 hours a day, you get to know so much about everybody. You get to know their family, their relatives, where they're from, you know, what injuries they've had, what challenges they've had, and we're just like another family as opposed to the one at home. It's just like another family.
I got a job here as a first aid attendant, and then I ended up taking a scaling and grading training program because the government was funding 40% of our wages for women in non-traditional fields. And CANFOR utilized that to our advantage, and we received our training that way. It was great. It was a wonderful opportunity, and I've never regretted it for a moment. There's always going to be logging. I would be hesitant to encourage people to go into scaling unless they were prepared to move around a lot or be adaptable, go into camps. There's just not a lot of jobs. Eventually, though, I mean, we're aging, so there's going to be some jobs, and they're going to need people, and there is initiatives going forward with companies to train people for the logging sector because they realize young people are looking at the oil fields in Alberta as more opportunistic employment for their futures, and they're losing a lot of the young resources, you know, from this province. So they're trying to encourage young people to stay and to get into the forest industry because we're going to need them. Well, when we came into the industry, women in scaling were still, and women in the logging industry in general, not just scaling, but you know, we had women strappers, machine operators. So it was still novelty, and it wasn't easy in the sense that there was an unspoken kind of barrier. We were, by and large, made to feel welcome, and we got along very well and integrated very well with our male co-workers. But there were times when you felt that there was some kind of, I don't know if you'd use the word resentment, a barrier. Yeah. It's not really resentment, but there was times when it was very difficult to even sit in the lunchroom because the talk was so vile. You assumed that they were trying to get a reaction out of you, and the best thing to do was just ignore it. It was just smutty talk. And anyway, by and large, the guys are fine, and over the years everything's changed. I mean, there is no talk like that now because there's laws that prevent harassment and laws that prevent you know, that type of behavior. So respect is way more prevalent now in our work environment, and so young people nowadays won't encounter that, I don't imagine. Very little. I mean, there's always going to be some interpersonal things that occur in work sites, but it won't be the way it was when I got into the industry 35 years ago.
In the year 1890, the development of log scaling in BC began. For the next 83 years, log scaling was a male-dominated occupation. 39 years ago, women became employed in the industry, joining their male counterparts in carrying out this important duty. We would like to thank all of the women who participated in this project, and many thanks to Western Forest Products for giving us access to their work sites to film and conduct our interviews.
I personally would like to encourage women in general to get involved and not be afraid of a job like this, where you're working around heavy equipment, where you're working in an industry that is man-dominant. It's really empowering for women, it really is. And men are actually really easy to work for and with. They're just awesome.